This would have been in my fourth pregnancy after all the complications of the first three. I remember the feeling really well of not wanting to call attention to anything. Like, could this one work out? And is this kind of what does this mean? And where will it, like the complete uncertainty, like you asked about earlier, sort of how do we live in those in between spaces? I remember that kind of a feeling too.
Welcome to Success Reimagined. I am Dr. Amna Shabir, your host on this journey to thrive at the intersection of ambition and wellness. In every episode, I'll help you challenge outdated definitions of success, discover practical tools and strategies for growth without compromising your well-being. I am so glad you've joined me. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Today's guest is Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a family medicine and public health physician whose bedside manner extends from clinics to storytelling. After facing a string of life-threatening pregnancy losses and rare medical complications, she found herself longing for community and decided to build one through words. Her writing has appeared in Harvard Magazine, the New England Journal of Medicine, and beyond. In her debut work, Held Together, a Shared Memoir of Motherhood, Medicine, and Imperfect Love, she braids her story with those of 21 women, patients, friends, and colleagues to show how sharing our hardest truths can heal, connect, and strengthen us all. Dr. Thompson, welcome to the show. To
Thanks
share
for
that,
having me. Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for that.
I was moved by Held Together would be an understatement. I heard the audio snippet that's on your website, and I was crying before I had even started the book. You write so
Thank you.
beautifully. So reading your stories really humbled me to the challenges so many women face. Many of them are invisible from the outside. Can you give us a high-level view of why we should all read Held Together?
That's such an insightful and beautiful way to put it that the stories humbled you to the challenges. I've never heard someone say that before. And I think that really captures it perfectly because you're absolutely right that so many of us just try to keep our challenges invisible to the world. And that means that we have to acknowledge and understand that we never really know what other people are going through either, right? So I think this is exactly what Held Together offers, what I hope to offer in writing it and creating it and collaborating with all of these amazing women, and why I hope so many people will read it, because it's a really rare glimpse into these hidden worlds of complicated family life. And that's biologic family, adoptive family, chosen family, family broadly defined. And I think the ways that we build and sustain these kinds of relationships, that's just so foundational to our identity. There's maybe nothing more compelling than these kinds of stories and hearing someone reflect honestly, genuinely about the most intimate aspects of her life. It's because it's so vulnerable, I just think it's so engaging to hear people grappling with this. And yes. So that's why I think that Held Together really can offer something to anyone who's interested in these kinds of stories. And, it covers everything from childhood memories and reflections to teen pregnancies, early family building and family experiences, all the way to reflections of there's one collaborator in her 70s who looks back on her all the way from childhood to where she is now and how her very non-traditional family has come together in a complicated way that she never expected, but how she wouldn't trade it for anything through all the struggles. And I've been told by midlife moms and medical professionals and even a few grandfathers in their 80s that they just couldn't put it down. So I think that when stories like this, the power is when they come together to create something that's bigger than what any individual life represents.
Beautifully said. I will say this. When I picked up the book, I had assumptions, and that's why I used the word humbled.
Tell me more.
I'm a woman and I'm a mom. Been through pregnancy. I've been through postpartum depression twice. I have a very close family relative who struggled with infertility for a very long period of time. I thought I knew what I was getting into when I picked up the book. I just told myself, I feel that for me, it was Actually, the way you write drew me in more than the stories initially. It's this
Mhm.
the snippet. It's just like the way you weave the words together. Because for me, a little bit of a snob, and that's where my perfectionism comes in and why my book on perfectionism is still in very much underway. I feel like there is a very significant art when you weave together words and the sort of words that you use. So the audio snippet that drew me in was the actual use of the words and how beautifully they were put together. But when I picked up the book, I thought to myself, I feel like I know where this is headed. I'm excited. I want to learn more. But when I started actually listening to the book, that's where all the emotions that I was feeling started to come in, and I just said, "Amna, you just don't know." That's what I said to myself, "You
Mm,
just don't know." And it was so humbling. I'm still getting emotional as I'm talking about it because it was so humbling for me, and I felt the 2 things that came up for me as I was listening to your book was, "Wow, there's so much I didn't know, and now I feel like I have a better idea," and
wow.
the awareness of my own lack of knowledge, and the other was I felt held together. I felt connected to all the stories that you weaved
Mm.
into the book, and it takes a very special way to write and to communicate for the other human to be able to experience all those extremely powerful emotions. I couldn't stop listening till all the way to the end. It's like those grandfathers you've mentioned.
Wow, thank you. That's I can't tell you how rewarding it is to hear that. I mean, that's exactly why we all did this project, why we came together to do this. We we were writing this book for you, for women who have that feeling of I've been through it. I want to see my story reflected in other people's stories, but also learn about other things that can happen. And I think I know what the possibilities are, but then to be surprised like that, I think that really taps into I love it that this book gave you curiosity. It inspired you to really wonder, like, what else don't I know about people? If I had made these assumptions, I'd gone into it thinking I could imagine what I was going to learn. And yet there was so much more behind the scenes. And I think that that kind of curiosity is what makes us more compassionate. That's the foundations of compassion. So I love it that it did that for you. It's exactly what we hoped.
So powerful, so powerful. There is so much power when in honesty, and you were so honest in the book. How did you muster up that courage to write and to release this very deeply personal part of you for all of us to be curious to learn more for our benefit?
I mean, there are some things that are hard about doing that, and some things about doing that that make life easier to be able to just say what you want without really worrying about what others will think and how they will judge it. I hope that in retrospect, maybe I took the advice that I tried to give to all the other collaborators. So as I worked with them, I asked them, as some of them were thinking about using a pseudonym, about half of them did use a pseudonym, half of them, used their real name and full identifying details. And I said to everybody as we're starting out, let's try to capture the most honest version of your story that we can. Let's talk about, anything you're comfortable sharing. We can always decide later what parts to omit, what parts to highlight, and whether you put your name on it or change some identifying detail. And I think I imagine I was giving myself permission to do the same thing. I don't really feel like I held back on what I wanted to say. And I don't remember changing or omitting much from my own story, but I think that's because in one of the stories, we talk about how this is in Tess's chapter, which is the first story you hear aside from my own. She's a close friend from medical school. And she talks about during her training in psychiatry, how one of her professors tells her, when we talk about our stories, sometimes it makes it harder to like to be in that moment. Telling the story is hard, but over time, it kind of softens how you live it, how you remember it, and she says, "Telling our stories might save us all." So, I think that getting those stories out there really does create a kind of healing by offering meaning for things that don't always make sense in the moment.
In this show, we challenge what success looks like and we redefine it for ourselves. A lot of times, the invisible pain in our personal lives goes unaccounted for. If someone is struggling with personal loss or stress, how do we create breathing space for what can't be instantly fixed but must be lived?
That's a hard one. I think your question acknowledges that the uncertainty of these in between times can be the hardest place to inhabit, right? So, I mean, some of the things that come to mind are kind of cliche, but I think they're true. They're overused and over recommended for a reason. So, talking to others, right? If you're able to, it really helps you, really understand that you're not alone, that everyone has challenges. They're different challenges, but you can still support each other through the hardest times if you're able, and as you know from reading this book, I wasn't able to do that right away when things were so complicated for us because I felt like the complications kept happening so fast that I hadn't even quite figured out how to tell myself my own story. I couldn't possibly imagine how to explain it to someone else yet. We were right in the thick of it, like you're alluding to. But, if you're not in a position and a place mentally where you feel like you can talk to others and open up, I think this is where reading and hearing the stories of others can really help. So, you can explore the experiences of others from a safe place and take your time, and books and podcasts, these are so great for this, right? And I would also say you can step away when you need to, right? So it's okay to sometimes separate from losses and stress and all the heaviness of life. Don't let it consume you. And like, even when things are really terrible in many parts of your life, there's got to be something even tiny that you can carve out and like find some small pleasure or connection in one isolated realm of your life, right? Like a favorite meal, a call to a friend, time in a space, a physical space that you find beautiful. And that unfixable things will be there when you get back. So I think this is what really holds the stories and held together. Like what they represent is we can hold all these complexities at once, right? We can look for joy in times of challenge because, in spite of all of the challenges that the stories in Held Together represent that the women in the project face, this is not a sad book. It's full of hard things, but I feel like it's also full of so much beauty and wonder and like even a little more humor than you might expect. So you can hold it all at once. That's what we do, especially as family members, as women. That's what we do. And I would say also, if what's causing you the pain right now, a person is about complicated family relationships, like we talk about in the book, specifically about family building or these interpersonal challenges. I hope that it brings comfort to see through our stories, through other stories that you may listen to and hear about, that families can take so many forms, that so many people, I'd say most of the people in the book, their families have come together in kind of less traditional ways. And it's easy to feel really discouraged when things aren't happening as we'd envisioned, but being open to more paths and more outcomes and having a wider definition of family, that can bring us so much more satisfaction in our relationships too.
What came up for me as I was hearing you talk was this push that we have these days to fix things.
Mhm.
Everything we want to hack our way through life. Here is the 3 tips that you can take, and it's going to fix your skin, fix your relationships. We're on these social media platforms that really sell that. And I can't even fathom being in that space where there are a lot of things you can't instantly fix
Mhm.
and being sort of gaslighted into, well, there's wellness, you could be happy, you need to do all those things. And I feel like we can't hack our way into healing. It
Mhm.
takes
Mhm.
time, it's different. I remember the combination of social media and the way I was feeling compared with social cultural norms. Why are you feeling postpartum depression when people are going through infertility around you?
Right,
Was a really
right.
big thing that would constantly play through my mind to the point where it was preventing me from actively seeking help. So I really wanted to hold space for that and point out to everyone everything doesn't need to be fixed right now, hacked. And I always, when I'm in my one on one sessions with my clients, I also talk about like, what if we don't need to fix anything?
Right.
What if you're not broken to begin with? I have to agree, this is not a sad book. This is not about that. Just because Amna was crying is because she felt a lot of powerful emotions. I
Right.
definitely want to point that out to the reader. There's so much optimism, there's so much knowledge. And the other thing I like to point out is shared human experience that came up to me
Mm,
in a very different way. So thank you for that very wonderful pearl that you said that there could be one thing that is
mhm,
going well that you can really lean into in that really
mhm.
rough space.
Mhm, and just go and find that and do that, even if it feels like it won't work, just try, just do it. I mean, for a lot of people, being outdoors or, like I said, a favorite meal or a connection with a person who's special to you, just do the thing, even if you don't want to, just make yourself do it, put it on the schedule, just do it.
Let's do it. Yes.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about this earlier as well, and in the book, you really show clearly that our healing journeys are diverse as women, as much as the women that are living them. And even with all that diversity, there were common beautiful threads that ran through all the women's experiences. What were some of the most powerful threads that you noticed while writing Held Together?
Thanks for highlighting that. I really appreciate that perspective, and because I do think, like, as wide-ranging as these stories are, they are at their core, they're all about these extraordinary moments hidden within ordinary lives. And I think a couple of threads, there are 2 that pop into my mind when you ask about that, and I think the first one is growth.
Mm.
Think that what's so compelling about these stories to me as I, heard them, learned more than I knew before, even if these people I'd known for years, I thought I knew their story. Like you said, I had an assumption. I thought I knew about their story, and sitting down and talking with them and interviewing them and transcribing that and going back and forth to craft the story with them, I learned so much more. And to see them, to have the privilege of witnessing them grow and change as her story unfolds, especially when there were very unexpected turns of events happening, right? Even the kinds of growth and change that she might experience were unexpected to her and to the reader, right? Not just the experience itself, but how she reacted, how she changed, how she responded. I think that ties into the idea that a lot of us wouldn't have chosen what happened in these stories, but we choose to make meaning out of it and be open to change, be receptive to change, while also pushing back and saying, we can have power to define our stories and define our paths, even in opposition to what others are telling us is expected. So I think that growth and change is the first huge theme that really resonates in every story. And then another thing that comes to mind, we were talking earlier about kind of how we give ourselves permission to talk about the difficult things and decide how we craft our stories. I think the second idea that runs through all of them is the realization that exploring uncomfortable ideas can bring us so much comfort, especially when we're in community. And that's because, as I was saying, like, I feel that talking about our struggles gives other people permission to talk about difficult topics too. So that ultimately helps us, back on ourselves to feel less alone, and it strengthens our ability to weather whatever the next unexpected challenges that comes our way. And it really helps counter perfectionism. Like you talk about in so many of your conversations here, I really think that family life is all about embracing this imperfect love.
When I was reading the book, that's exactly what came to my mind.
Yeah. What did you know from threads? Yeah.
I think it was a wonderful space. It's almost like meditative. It was
Mm,
meditative for me. It was I am listening, I'm learning, I'm here, and it's just this really profound and moment where you realize all the lies sort of that you're told, that
Mm,
life has to be a certain way, and then the systems that you're surrounded with that continue to perpetuate those lies because at the end of the day, we're coping with lies with perfectionism. So that's what came up for me that, the thing was that I was supposed to follow the checklist, and if I worked hard, the checklist would work, and it
mm.
didn't. And then when it didn't, I am a failure. It was me to the point where I say simple and I laugh. When I got the news that I'm going to have my first daughter, the day I found out I was expecting, I was also handed a very serious diagnosis in a span of like a couple of hours. And
Mm.
how I grappled with that, I just felt like that's it. This is where it goes down. There was first blip and there were many other blips as well, but it was a really big moment. So I just was so quiet. I said, if I'm quiet and I pretend that this is not happening, maybe it's really not happening. So the way we just justify that, as I'm reading your book, I started to really like reflect on the ways I did not want to share, the ways I wanted to stay quiet. And so it was wonderful that simultaneously I am learning about other human stories. There's this real growth happening as I'm reading your book, but I'm also able to, in parallel, just hold a lot of grace for myself as I went through my journey.
I love that. Yeah, I remember that feeling for sure, especially as and this would have been in my 4th pregnancy after all the complications of the first 3. I remember the feeling really well of not wanting to call attention to anything. Could this one work out? What does this mean? And where will it like the complete uncertainty, like you asked about earlier, sort of how do we live in those in between spaces? I remember that kind of a feeling too. I love the way you describe how immersed you felt in the book. I've had people tell me they felt like either they're, sitting beside someone or walking beside someone and she's just sort of like their best friend. They're on a road trip or on a walk and she's telling the story, or like they're sitting reading someone's journal. And I love that image that you've almost stepped into this person's life. And I'm so glad it did that for you. I feel like, ultimately the reason that these stories, I think, what the common threads that weave through them that we can all find something to relate to is that they are really about the universal in the specific. So the more detailed the narrative, you'd think it would make people feel like, well, that's not what happened to me, so I can't relate. But it almost transcends to that next level of we see the common themes, even when the stories are so different. The big things that are important to us, they never change, right? We all seek safety and connection and meaning, and it's just the details that vary. So to see people grappling with that, I think stories like these, I've said, can be both a window and a mirror. So you get a glimpse into things you think could never imagine happening to you, and you're peeking in, and it's fascinating. It's incredibly compelling. But as a mirror, we read these stories, we feel something familiar, something resonant, something sympathetic and relatable in any one of them, even when the details are nothing like our own lives. And we come away understanding something new about ourselves.
I totally agree. There was this particular story in
Yeah.
this particular scene. There was a child crying, and that child did not stop crying. And the way you had written that scene and like that specific part,
Mm,
I was just wow. I felt like I get that. That is so hard when you love this little person who is an extension of your own body essentially, and they don't stop crying. And how do you grapple with that? And then, we talk about achievement and women in all these roles and parents in all these roles, not just women. And how hard that is. And the next day, you have to go and you have to show up for yourself. You have to show up for all these other people you're leading, the team that you're leading, and your child did not stop crying the day
yeah,
before. And how do you handle that? And so, what are you going to do at that point? Are you going to look at all the ways that social media is telling you that you're falling short and you're not
right.
enough and you're failing as a parent? And things didn't go as planned, and then what do you do? So you're absolutely right. This is both a window and a mirror situation where you can learn so much in so many different ways. I will say this again, it's deeply humbling to read this book. It's really eye-opening. I think that this world really is lacking in compassion, both for ourselves and for each other, and kindness. And
Yeah.
we are becoming, just click and dopamine receive.
Yeah.
Same way, we're forgetting the tremendous stories that are just happening and they're unfolding around us, and because we don't know, we don't hold space for them.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And like we talked about at the beginning, too, bringing this full circle, this is this kind of humility that you describe in yourself that you're feeling from this experience, from reading these. This is what creates compassion, what we need more of in the world. And I think this is especially relevant in medicine, this idea of humility, because we're used to being in a position of caring for others and almost, being held up. The expression goes, look up to us, right? Look to us for guidance and advice. And um, you know, again, the meaning of the word humble, it's to lower yourself, it's to lower someone, right? When we bring ourselves into an experience to be on in that common space, to be on common ground, to treat each other more as equals. This is something I really thought about. I write a bit about in the book too, but how my perspective changed when I went back to the second residency that I did because of all our complications, wanting to give back everything I'd learned from the good and bad care I'd received, how my perspective really changed from, oh, I want to help people. We all go into medicine to help people, to help the world in some way, right? But it shifted. I think this is subtle, but my perspective from the idea of helping more to the idea of serving, like being of service. And this is more about meeting people where they are for what they need rather than thinking that you have it.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. We need to be there with them in the pain, and when we talk about fixing and having the
Mhm.
answers,
Yes. Right.
that's where all the perfectionism also shows up. That's where all
Right.
the feeling of lack of autonomy and control come in because there is no control. We are taking responsibility and pretending that we can offer and do things, first of all, that we can't. And so, absolutely, we approaching it from a space of service is what all great clinicians, I mean, this is going back to all the attendings that we've ever loved and looked up to, are those people that have been humble, that just lead with that. And of course, they all have stellar bedside manner as well,
Right.
shines through.
Yeah, and it comes back to your concern that I fully agree with. Like people think they need to fix themselves and they're looking for answers and solutions. We're not great as a society about living in the moment, living in the complicated stories. We're really bad at nuance. As humans, and I think our culture right now in particular is pretty bad at nuance. And I think that if we let go of the idea of fixing, both for our patients, our loved ones, and for ourselves, we can be a lot more compassionate in that way as well.
And we can also save so much energy because all the energy is dissipated in the space of resistance where what is
Mm,
happening to us, we're constantly like, there's this resistance, this
yeah,
active resistance because it's not going along with those narratives of what the perfect outcome needed to be versus what the reality is, and so in the
yeah.
middle, where there's this expectation gap, we are
Yes,
constantly in resistance.
absolutely. The suffering is in the gap. Yep. Expectation versus reality.
As we close for today, Becca, I would love to hear any of your closing reflections. And before, of course, we're going to give the call to action for everyone to read the book. But for someone who's out there who's struggling, any thoughts, any reflections that you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I think I just really hope that having these stories out there in the world and maybe inspiring more stories like this to come out into the world, I hope it helps us all feel more patient with each other, with ourselves, counter some of that quick judgment, that relentless pace of social media and performance and perfectionism. And so I just really hope that this book, that our stories will reach everyone who might find, comfort and reassurance and validation, maybe even a little bit of inspiration from the stories. I hope it brings people just that feeling of that they can get through things, they can get through hard things. We've done it not perfectly. Just show up for themselves and for each other, and be more patient and open to whatever might come next.
Love that. How can our listeners get to know more about you, read this beautiful work of art that you've produced, and
Thank
share
you.
it with their own workspaces? Like this needs to be read and discussed.
Oh, thanks. I really hope it will. Everything's on my website. So it's just the same as my name as on the book, not with the MD. So it's RebeccaNThompson.com. You can read the full introduction to the book to see if it's a good fit for you, the writing style. You can see all the just incredibly generous and beautiful endorsements and reviews that we've started to get. So grateful for those. And you can order the book in hardcover, ebook, audiobook, all the formats. So it should be accessible to a lot of people that way. If you are able to buy the book, we appreciate that so much for your support because we just want to get this into the hands of as many people as possible. And if you do buy your copy through my website, there are a couple of intriguing options there, I think. Some of them you can find your local bookseller, which is great to support a small business. And I have links also that support Postpartum Support International with PSI, which is a maternal and family mental health organization. And a portion of the proceeds will be sent to them, which I would be so grateful ordering that way. And if anybody wants a signed copy, you can get that anywhere in the US. There's a local bookstore here near me that I can go sign copies anytime. It'll get out to you in a few days. So you can order through, it's on the website. It's called Annie Bloom's Books, and there's a link on my order page to specify signed. And I'd love to do that for anyone here. Of course, if buying books is not in your budget, that's understandable these days, especially. Please look for it at your library. If they don't have it, you can request for them to get it, and that way more people will be able to find it that way and afford to read it as well. Libraries are amazing, so please support them. And like you said, it's such a word of mouth book. So in whatever way you read it or listen to it, just the best thing you can do, I'd appreciate all of us would, collaborators, so much if you would tell a few people about it that you think would benefit from it. Tell family or friends, put a rating or review up on all the usual places. It helps it get it out into the algorithms and other people finding it. And I hope that it will be widely read in medical training programs, book clubs. Reach out to me if you want to connect about that. But anyway, any kind of support you can offer, just get these stories into as many hands as possible. We really appreciate it.
Becca, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
You might believe you don't have the time or energy to focus on yourself, but this is exactly the right time to get serious about your well-being. You don't have to do it all alone. I'm here to help. If you enjoyed this video and are ready to take the next step, head over to dramneshabir.com where you'll find free resources you can access right away. The website link is below. Let's get started on your path to thriving.